I was told two things growing up. 1, marry a man who'll take care of you. 2, go to school for as long as you can. Just take out loans. It'll work out. Spoiler, neither of these worked out. In fact, one of them nearly wrecked my life. Here's what I did instead and how it changed everything. Hi there, I'm Paige and welcome to Nerdonomic, where this nerd talks about money. Holy cow, right? My mom really drove home this idea of getting a man who will take care of you financially. This was her big crowning jewel of advice.
She wants to marry a man with money.
So I'm willing to bet that I'm not alone here. I actually grew up in a very conservative religious family in rural Maine. My mother was a stay-at-home mother. She had married my father, who was a very good provider. He started out as a construction laborer, and with hard work and his big brain, he's a very smart guy, was able to become the head mechanical superintendent for a large construction company. Dad was awesome. This is not to disparage them or what they did for their lives, but money advice and the proper thing to do financially is always a function of time and place, okay?
Let me show you just to be sure, okay?
And both of these ideas, that you marry a man, he'll take care of you financially, or you go to college forever and it will mysteriously work out no matter how many loans you take or what you major in. These are very conventional, culturally reinforced beliefs, especially where I grew up. But I'll tell you, rural Maine, the economy didn't support that vision whatsoever. It was very tough to find jobs. It's not always the best economy.
Well, that's putting it mildly.
And everywhere it's getting harder to afford the cost of living on a single income, but especially so in rural Maine. I'm happy this worked out for my mother, but it wasn't going to be working out for me. Not to mention how expensive college got and how it became less of a differentiator in the job market and continues to do so. That's another thing. Perhaps I should do another episode on that. But let's talk about what actually happened when I followed this advice. So I did actually get married. I was actually the latest to get married in my friends group. It wasn't until I was 24. We were like the last two single people everybody knew. I married Seth, and instead of Seth taking care of me, I became the breadwinner. Seth was really confident and very charming. He was a lot of fun and we had the same sense of humor. And Seth's not a bad looking guy. Like, there are reasons I married Seth. But we had some big differences in ways that mattered. Where I was a workaholic and very driven and very concerned always with how we were going to survive, Seth completely lacked ambition or work ethic. He had a really hard time holding a job. He was completely undisciplined as far as spending. He wasn't somebody that helped with the chores. It was kind of a nightmare, honestly. It was a situation where the more I did, the less he did. And it wasn't like I could stop working hard, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be able to pay rent and we'd get evicted or starve. I cared immensely about not being homeless. And Seth knew this. So he would just slack off more and more. I actually went into a whole episode about different ways that transpired that I will link if you want to watch this after this one. But yeah, finding a man to take care of me was not a simple matter. And instead I had a guy that literally spent our rent money one time on video games and lost our housing over it. So there's that. So that was the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice, to go to school for as long as possible and take as many loans as possible and it would all work out. I actually didn't follow this advice to go into massive debt. And I'm super glad, because the first mistake with Seth is the biggest financial mistake of my life and it almost ruined me. The reason why was that I was actually too broke to really go to school right away. I was non-traditional. So I actually had the great experience of watching other people around me do it first, to go first. And I saw it didn't work out. And it actually saved me a lot of heartache, a lot of hassle, and a lot of money. Let's talk about what I did instead. So when I went to school, I started at a community college, and it was a very inexpensive community college. It was $71 a credit hour. I went for something very specific. I went for medical terminology. It's actually an associate's in business administration, and my concentration was in medical terminology, and I became a transcriptionist. I was also qualified to work in a medical office. So what I ended up doing was I was working from home and I was typing medical records and doing that sort of thing for doctors. That was amazing. And I was also qualified to work, registration for the hospital or to be a receptionist, medical receptionist. And so I was able to do that program in a couple of years. I got scholarships because I was a good student. I worked as a library aide on campus and also a math tutor. And then my final semester of the 4, I was hired as an intern at a medical transcription firm, and I worked unpaid for a few months, got my skills up though, and they hired me right out of school. So I didn't even have a job search or anything. And all of a sudden I was making about $65K in the early 2000s in my pajamas at home, which was fantastic. Prior to going back to school, I had been making $7.11 an hour as a bookseller at Borders Bookstore in Bangor. So to go from $7.11 an hour, even at full-time, which I was, to $65K a year because my pay was production-based, and I was the fastest transcriptionist on the staff at the time. That was huge. It completely changed my life. So that went on for a good 6-7 years. Unfortunately, a lot of medical documentation started being looked at as something that people wanted to take out of healthcare to make it more profitable. So they started doing more voice rec and that sort of thing, kind of early AI rollout, that and offshoring some of it to India and overseas. So what we started having to do is, instead of typing up the medical records ourselves, we would be correcting AI slop essentially, or ESL work that had a lot of mistakes. And our employers decided this would be easier for us than actually just typing out clean medical records by ourselves with expanders. It wasn't. It took longer. It took me 3 or 4 times longer, and they cut my pay way down because they decided it'd be easier. And so I went from making $65K to making minimum wage again, basically. So at this point, I had gotten divorced from Seth. Yeah, spoiler, he's my ex-husband, and I got remarried to someone else who has a lot more in common with me, who has a good work ethic. We're very good friends. We were friends for a while before we actually dated, and then eventually got married. So what we did at that point, I talked to Justin about it, and at this point I was living in Cleveland. So I went to Cleveland State University, and one of the cool things about Cleveland State University at this time is it was a lot more per credit hour than my first school. Instead of like 71, I think it was 200 something at this point, which I went there 2012, around then. But Cleveland State at that point had a really cool deal. They basically had full-time in-state tuition, and it was a bulk price. And full-time was anything over 12 hours. They did not care if it was 12 hours or if it was 20 or 24 hours, same price. So what I did is every single semester I took at least 20 credit hours. One semester I took 24. I also did the interlibrary loan system of Ohio. So basically I would find what my textbooks were and I would request them through the library, and they would come. And I would read my textbooks and take all the notes and stuff by the time I had to return them. I did that every semester. I saved lots of money. When they weren't available through interlibrary loan, I would go on Amazon and I would buy a used version, usually a former edition, and it didn't matter. I know, they try to trick you to think if it's the 14th edition, it's going to be so much better than the 13th. For the most part, it didn't matter. And what ended up happening was I ended up graduating early with 2 degrees. And not only did I make all this work, I actually was nominated for valedictorian. I didn't win, but it was pretty cool that I got nominated. Tells you I was a good student, that I made all this work, even on a shoestring. The cool thing about CSU is they also had a system where I think it was like $20 or something a year for a bus pass. Something like that. It was really cheap. It was basically a trivial amount of money. My house at the time was like a mile from a bus stop, or a mile and a half. I just walked there, took the bus every day. Yeah, pretty simple. In some of the cold winter times, I had to wear like a balaclava, like the hood, like, you know, like the bank robbers wear. But I made it work, took the city bus in. But yeah, graduated early, almost no debt. And I worked with a student career center, and I got a job right out of school working at a psychological consulting firm. And then what happened later with that is that I had a couple of forks in the road I could take at that point. Once I started consulting for other businesses when I was working at the psych firm, they basically put me through some employment testing there. And it said that I should either be a CEO or an entrepreneur, which I thought was very strange. I didn't think of myself as particularly business oriented, but I kind of was like, that's very interesting, this employment battery. Did some more looking at everything, and I realized I'd probably be a really good fit for a business program. So I was looking around at MBAs and things in the area. Some of the people that I actually had working for me at the time were MBAs. They had got their MBAs, and now they were doing like trainings for this firm I was working. I was their bosses because I was the manager in the training department. And they said, no, don't pay for an MBA program. It is a waste of money. I was like, oh, okay. They're like, well, most of what you get is connections. But the thing is that you're going to want your connections in your sphere of business. You don't want general academic connections anyway. A lot of it you can learn just by doing and by being an entrepreneur, and a lot of them express regret. So what I ended up doing was I picked up this book that one of my employees had recommended to me. It was called Personal MBA, which I will link below. It's amazing. You kind of look through and it recommends different books you should read and ways you should branch out. And I went on this quest. I read a whole bunch of business books. I took open courses with Harvard and MIT. They had it so you could take business courses for free, basically auditing them, learning all of that. And I drew up my business roadmap and I launched my business while I was still working full-time at my day job. So that was the thing. I could have taken out big loans for the MBA and I could have had the same regrets that my employees had. Now these days, I am just as successful as the people that used to work for me. And we were all very successful. So I didn't really need to do that. It's really become easier and easier to do self-driven paths and alternative learning. And like if you're here on YouTube, you know, there's so much free information now that's available online. It's just more of a matter of learning to filter through it and use critical thinking to qualify sources and to apply it to your everyday life. So on the marriage front, I eventually did get divorced, and that was a pain in the buns, but it was for the best. He's doing a lot better now too, Seth, by the way. Some people want to boss other people around, and that is good, and I'm happy for them. That ain't me, Chief. I'm not that person. I can't parent another adult. That's just not me. So I actually found, like I said, my second husband, Justin, is wonderfully hardworking, really ambitious, really cool guy. We're a much better fit. Seth is with somebody now who's much better for him. We're all happy. Actually, Seth and I have had friendly chats post-divorce, like things are good. Justin supported me going back and finishing my degree. He supported me building my own business. The business is thriving. He continues to help me in ways that he can. We are both financially independent, but we also work really well together. And not only that, but Justin, I've watched him go from a developer, like a coder, and become not only a manager, but a senior manager. He has thrived so much. I've used a lot of what I've learned in the learning and organizational development space, what I went to school for, what I worked for. I helped him apply those lessons and build his career as well. So I married well the second time, but it isn't like he takes care of me, we take care of each other, and I think that's the way it should be. So I would recommend not relying on your partner for your financial security. Have your own plan. Like, it's good if you can help each other and make each other the best versions of yourself and build something cool together, but I think it's bad when one of you is completely dependent on the other, especially if it's not temporary or if you're not building towards something. I would also say on the student loan front, don't go into massive debt for a vague idea of success. Instead, optimize for likely return on investment, flexibility, and long-term value. And in this day and age, seek low cost or free education whenever possible. Sometimes you do need a certification, and whether that's a degree or a program, sometimes you need that for a job, and I'm not trying to knock that. That's fine. If you're going for something and you need to have a specific license or certification or degree, okay. But don't spend a whole bunch of money on education, cross your fingers, and hope that it pays off, because that's a dangerous game. Whenever possible, try to learn about business and money for yourself. I really recommend that book, Personal MBA. Even if you're not thinking about starting your own business, even being able to understand how other businesses operate as a consumer is very helpful. If you'd like, I could do an episode on the book. Just drop me a comment below and let me know. I really like the book. It's really interesting. But what's key here is don't wait to be educated or rescued by institutions. But yeah, that's some dangerous advice. Anyway, it's been great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.